The first lie Soraya Belmont ever heard at her husband's company was not spoken by Callum himself, but by a security system that calmly informed her she did not exist. That morning, Denver looked polished enough to forgive almost anything. Snow rested along the edges of the sidewalks like powdered sugar. The sky was a pale winter blue, and the glass tower of Whitaker Horizon rose above downtown with the quiet arrogance of a man who had never had to explain himself. Soraya stood at the entrance with a small walnut gift box tucked beneath one arm, her camel coat buttoned neatly over a cream dress, her brown skin glowing softly beneath the cold Colorado light. Inside the box was Callum's grandfather's old pocket watch, repaired after 6 months of searching for the right craftsman, the same watch he once held in his palm at midnight and whispered, "Someday, I'll fix everything my family broke." She had believed him then. She had believed many things. The lobby doors opened with a breath of warm air, carrying the scent of cedar, espresso, and expensive ambition. On the marble wall ahead, a silver sign read Whitaker Horizon, powering tomorrow, and Soraya smiled despite herself, because once, before the board meetings and private flights and charity photographs, Callum had built his first solar prototype in a rented garage outside Boulder, and she had brought him coffee in paper cups while he forgot to eat. Today was supposed to be simple. No cameras, no gala, no carefully staged public appearance where she stood 3 feet behind him and pretended not to notice how often his team called her private. She only wanted to surprise her husband at work, place the repaired watch in his hand, and remind him that time still belonged to people brave enough to tell the truth. The young receptionist looked up from her screen with a professional smile that faded the moment Soraya gave her name. "Soraya Belmont Whitaker," she said gently. "I'm here to see my husband, Callum." The woman typed, paused, typed again, then glanced toward the security desk as if the floor beneath them had shifted. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, her voice becoming careful. "Mrs. Whitaker already checked in at 8:12 this morning." For a moment, the whole lobby seemed to lose sound. The elevator bells, the winter boots crossing marble, the soft hiss of the espresso machine, all of it moved far away. Soraya's fingers tightened around the walnut box, but her face remained still. Not empty, not weak. Still, the way a lake freezes before anyone understands how deep the water goes. If you are listening to this now, maybe in your car, maybe in your kitchen, maybe late at night when the world is quiet, tell me where you are and what your heart is feeling, because some stories do not begin with shouting. Some begin with a woman standing at a doorway, realizing the life she protected may have been given to someone else. Soraya looked at the receptionist, then at the towering digital directory behind her, where Callum's company celebrated integrity in bright white letters. "There must be a mistake," she said, though something inside her already knew mistakes did not wear wedding names. Soraya did not move at first. She simply watched the receptionist's eyes flicker between the computer screen and the walnut box in her hands, as if the small gift had become evidence of something uncomfortable. Behind them, the morning rush continued with polished efficiency. Men in navy coats crossed the lobby with leather briefcases. Women in tailored wool suits tapped badges against glass gates. A courier rolled in 2 carts of white orchids for some executive luncheon upstairs. Everything about Whitaker Horizon looked calm, expensive, and certain, while Soraya felt the first quiet crack travel through the center of her life. "Could you check again, please?" she asked, her voice low enough that it did not invite attention. The receptionist swallowed, then forced a smile. "Of course, ma'am." Her fingers moved quickly, too quickly, and the screen reflected in her glasses with cold blue light. "I have a visitor profile for Soraya Belmont, but it is marked inactive for executive access." The words did not sound cruel. That made them worse. Inactive, as though a wife could be archived like an old press release. Soraya looked past the desk toward the vast digital wall above the security gates. A promotional video played without sound, showing wind turbines turning beneath a Colorado sunrise, schoolchildren planting trees, Callum shaking hands with the governor, and then, suddenly, Callum standing beside a woman Soraya had never met. The woman wore an ivory suit, soft blonde hair swept behind one shoulder, one hand resting lightly on Callum's arm with the ease of someone who had practiced belonging there. Beneath the image, white letters appeared across the screen. Callum and Marisol Whitaker, a visionary couple for America's future. Soraya's breath stopped, but only for a second. She had learned long ago that pain liked an audience, and she refused to give it one. The walnut box remained steady in her hands. Her wedding ring, a simple oval diamond Callum had chosen before the billions came, caught the lobby light and flashed once, small and almost embarrassed. A security officer near the gate glanced at her ring, then at the image on the screen, and his expression changed in a way that told Soraya this was not new to him. That was the second wound. Not that the lie existed, but that others had been trained to walk around it. "Is there a problem?" a voice asked from behind her, smooth, feminine, and already familiar because the lobby had just given it a name. Soraya turned. Marisol Ven stood 10 feet away, surrounded by 2 assistants and the faint scent of white roses. Up close, she was immaculate, not flashy, not loud, but designed with the careful softness of a woman chosen for cameras. Her ivory coat fell perfectly to her knees, her pearl earrings glowed against her skin, and on her left hand was a ring that matched Soraya's closely enough to be intentional. For one strange moment, Soraya thought of the pocket watch. 2 faces, one mechanism hidden beneath. Marisol's gaze dropped to the walnut box, then to Soraya's ring, and something like recognition passed through her eyes before she covered it with a polite smile. "You must be here for facilities," Marisol said gently, but not kindly. "The staff entrance is on 17th Street. The receptionist froze. The security officer looked down. Soraya understood everything then. This woman did not. Mistake her for staff. She needed the room to hear it. Soraya's fingers relaxed around the box, and when she spoke, her voice was calm enough to make the marble lobby feel colder. "No," she said. "I came through the front door because that is where a wife enters." The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with everything no one in that lobby wanted to say. Marisol's assistants stopped breathing behind their polite faces. The receptionist lowered her eyes to the keyboard. Even the orchids near the elevator seemed too white, too perfect, too arranged for a world where truth had been treated like an inconvenience. Soraya stood with the walnut box against her coat and let the sentence settle exactly where it belonged. A wife enters. Not a rumor. Not a secret. Not a name stored in an inactive file. Marisol's smile held for 1 second longer than comfort allowed, then softened into something more dangerous than anger. "I am sure there has been some confusion," she said, her voice graceful enough for microphones. "Callum has many important guests, and we cannot allow disruptions before an investor presentation." Soraya looked at the ring on Marisol's hand. The diamond was larger than hers, brighter, colder, set in platinum that caught every ceiling light like it had been designed to win an argument. But Soraya remembered the night Callum had proposed with shaking hands beside a frozen lake outside Vale, when the wind had turned his ears red and he had laughed because the ring box nearly slipped into the snow. Hers had not been the biggest diamond in the world. It had been real. That used to be enough. "Then let us not disrupt anything," Soraya said. She turned to the security officer, an older man with silver at his temples and a badge that read Russell Hale. "Please call my husband's office." Russell hesitated. His eyes carried the tired kindness of someone who had seen too much and been paid to say too little. "Mrs." he began, then stopped, trapped between 2 women wearing the same title. Soraya saved him from choosing. She opened her purse, removed her driver's license, then placed it beside her left hand on the security counter. The legal name was clear. Soraya Belmont Whitaker. The wedding ring was clearer. Russell looked at both, then gave a small, almost invisible nod. "I will call upstairs." Marisol's expression changed so quickly that anyone else might have missed it. But Soraya had spent years watching boardrooms from the edge of photographs. She knew the moment control began to slip. "That will not be necessary," Marisol said. "Mr. Whitaker is unavailable." Soraya turned back to her. "To whom?" The question was quiet. Devastatingly quiet. Marisol did not answer. Behind the security gates, a private elevator opened with a soft chime, and 3 executives stepped out laughing until they saw the scene near the entrance. One of them, a tall man with a red tie and a folder marked confidential, looked directly at Soraya and went pale with recognition. She had met him 4 years ago at a dinner in Santa Fe, when Callum still introduced her as the woman who believed in him before the market did. He remembered. That mattered. He also looked away. That mattered more. Russell spoke into the phone in a low voice, then listened. His jaw tightened. "Yes, sir," he said finally. She is here. Soraya did not need to ask who had answered. The entire lobby felt it. A door had opened somewhere high above them, not made of glass or steel, but of consequence. Russell hung up and looked at Soraya with respect now, not pity. Mr. Whitaker will see you on the 47th floor. Marisol stepped forward. I will escort her. Soraya lifted the walnut box slightly, as if weighing time itself. No, she said. I have walked behind another woman in my own marriage long enough. Then she crossed the security gate alone. The elevator rose so smoothly that Soraya could hear her own heartbeat more clearly than the machinery. 47 floors above Denver, above the traffic sliding through streets dusted with snow, above the people who still believed glass towers were built from vision instead of secrets, Callum Whitaker waited. Soraya watched the floor numbers climb in silver light and remembered another elevator years ago, a narrow one in the old apartment building where they had lived before investors learned his name. Back then, Callum had carried grocery bags in both arms, laughing because the elevator shook every time it passed the 5th floor, and she had teased him that a man who wanted to change the future should first learn how to survive broken machinery. He had kissed her forehead in that tired, grateful way and said, "As long as you are with me, I can survive anything." The memory did not comfort her. It stood beside her like a witness. When the doors opened, the executive floor greeted her with silence too expensive to be natural. Frosted glass walls stretched along a corridor lined with black and white photographs of solar fields, mountain ridges, and Callum standing beside politicians who smiled as if power had no cost. At the far end, a conference room glowed with winter light. Inside, a dozen people sat around a long table, their tablets and water glasses arranged with military precision. Callum stood at the head of the room in a charcoal suit, one hand resting on the polished wood, the other frozen at his side, as if the phone call had turned him into marble. For the first time in months, he looked at Soraya without an audience telling him how. His eyes moved from her face to the walnut box in her hands, then to the ring on her finger, and something dark passed across his expression. Not surprise. Fear. Marisol arrived behind Soraya, just as the room went still. She moved quickly, but not quickly enough to reclaim the moment. "Callum," she said, breathless beneath her control. "I tried to handle this downstairs." Soraya stepped into the conference room before he could answer. The investors stared, some curious, some embarrassed, all of them suddenly aware that money could not protect them from truth. She placed the walnut box in the center of the table. The sound was small, almost gentle, but it landed harder than any accusation. "Your watch is fixed," she said. Callum swallowed. "Soraya, this is not the place." She looked around the room, at the campaign boards, the merger documents, the photograph on the screen showing him and Marisol beneath the words America's Clean Energy Family. Then she looked back at him. "It seems every place has been the place for another woman to wear my name," she said. "So this one will do." No one moved. Outside the windows, snow began falling again, soft and patient over downtown Denver. Callum lowered his voice. It was a branding decision. The words crossed the table and died there. Soraya almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because grief sometimes pauses when insult becomes too polished. "A branding decision," she repeated. "Is that what marriage became after you stopped coming home?" Marisol lifted her chin. The public needed stability. Callum needed someone visible, someone comfortable in that world. Soraya turned to her with a calm so complete it made the room feel smaller. "No, Marisol. He needed someone convenient." Then she faced Callum again, and the years between them opened like a door neither of them could close. "How long has she been wearing my name?" Callum did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer. Soraya nodded once, as if a contract had been signed inside her heart. The woman who had entered that building carrying hope was gone now. In her place stood someone quieter, clearer, and far less willing to be erased. Callum looked at the investors before he looked at Soraya, and that single glance told her everything. Even now, with her wedding ring flashing under the cold conference lights, with the repaired watch resting between them like the last breathing piece of their past, his first instinct was not pain. It was calculation. "Everyone, please give us a moment," he said, his voice smooth enough to belong in a crisis statement. Chairs shifted. Tablets closed. The people who had come to discuss billions in clean energy contracts left the room one by one, careful not to meet Soraya's eyes. Marisol remained beside the glowing campaign screen, where her smiling image stood next to Callum beneath the words America's Clean Energy Family. Marisol, Callum said quietly. Go. Her expression tightened. That would be unwise. The unwise part already happened. She gathered her tablet with perfect control and walked out, leaving the faint scent of roses behind her. When the glass door closed, Callum loosened his tie as if the room had run out of air. Soraya, he said. I know how this looks. She looked at the screen, then back at him. No, Callum. You know how it photographs. The words landed softly, but his face changed. He turned toward the windows, where downtown Denver blurred beneath falling snow. It started after the governor's summit, he said. The board wanted stability, federal contracts, public trust, a family image. You hated the cameras. You hated those events. I hated being treated like decoration. I thought I was protecting you. Soraya's voice stayed calm. By giving another woman my name? He swallowed. After the comments online, about our marriage, about race, about whether you belonged in my world, I thought keeping you private would spare you. For the first time, Soraya almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. You were ashamed of the cruelty aimed at me, so you hid me instead of standing beside me. That is not fair. Neither was being told to use the staff entrance in my own husband's building. His face went still. She said that. In front of everyone. Callum looked toward the door, anger flickering and disappearing beneath control. I will handle Marisol. Soraya shook her head. You still think this is about her? She opened the walnut box. Inside, the old pocket watch rested on blue velvet, silver, polished, alive again. Its hands moved with delicate certainty. Callum stared at it, and for 1 second, she saw the man from the rented apartment, the man who had once promised to fix what his family broke. I brought this because I believed time could still be repaired between us, Soraya said. But I did not know you had built another life out of my silence. Callum reached for a slim folder on the side table and placed it before her. A confidentiality agreement, he said carefully. $20 million. Your foundation funded. Your mother's house paid off. No public statement until after the merger. Then we can fix this privately. Soraya read the first line, then tore the page cleanly in half. The sound was small, but it filled the room. You cannot purchase the dignity you refuse to protect. Then she slipped the ring from her finger. It resisted. For one painful second before coming free. She placed it beside the torn agreement and the watch. Callum's voice lowered. Do not walk out like this. Soraya buttoned her coat with steady hands. I did not walk out, Callum. I was written out. Today, I am correcting the record. Soraya left the 47th floor without looking back. The elevator doors closed on Callum's face, on the silver watch, on the torn agreement, on the ring she had worn through 7 winters of believing love could survive distance if the heart stayed loyal. For 47 floors, she stood alone beneath the soft elevator lights, both hands empty for the first time in years. No box, no ring, no rehearsed smile waiting for cameras. Just her reflection in the polished steel, brown eyes bright but unbroken, camel coat dusted with melting snow from a morning that already felt like another life. When the doors opened into the lobby, every conversation seemed to lower itself. The receptionist looked at her with quiet regret. Russell Hale stood straighter by the security gate, as if respect was the only apology he was allowed to offer. Marisol was gone, but her image still glowed on the digital wall beside Callum's, smiling over the marble like a lie that had not yet learned it was dead. Soraya walked past it slowly, not because she wanted to see it one more time, but because she wanted the room to see her pass beneath it without shrinking. Outside, Denver's winter air met her face with clean, merciless honesty. She had forgotten her gloves upstairs, maybe on the conference table, maybe beside the life she had just returned. Snow gathered in her hair and along the shoulders of her coat as she stepped away from the tower. For one fragile second, the cold entered everything. Her fingers trembled. Her breath caught. A woman could be strong and still feel the ground disappear beneath her. Strength was not the absence of breaking. It was choosing where the pieces would fall. A young reporter stood near the curb, half hidden beneath a gray knit hat, holding a camera as if she was afraid of what she had captured. Mrs. Whitaker, she called softly, then corrected herself when Soraya turned. Ms. Belmont, I am sorry. I saw what happened downstairs. Is there anything you want people to know? Soraya looked at the glass tower behind her. 70 stories of money, power, and curated virtue. For years, she had protected Callum from public ugliness because she believed private loyalty was sacred. But silence had become a room where other people moved her furniture, changed her name, and told her to be grateful for the dark. She faced the reporter. Write the truth gently, she said. Some wounds are already loud enough. Then she walked away before the woman could ask another question. That afternoon, the photograph appeared online. Not the ring. Not the torn agreement. Not Callum's face. Just Soraya crossing the snowy sidewalk alone, coat open against the wind, chin lifted, eyes forward. The caption was simple. The hidden wife leaves Whitaker Horizon. By nightfall, the story had traveled farther than any company's statement could contain. Whitaker Horizon's public relations team denied nothing, clarified nothing, and promised a review of internal communications. Callum called 12 times, then 20, then sent one message that said, "Please let me explain without lawyers." Soraya read it from the back seat of a rideshare heading toward her small brownstone in 5 Points, then turned the phone face down. Her house was quiet when she entered. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that waits to see whether you will collapse or begin. She removed her coat, hung it carefully, then walked into the room she had once used as a design studio before marriage turned her talent into a hobby mentioned politely at dinners. Fabric samples still sat in labeled boxes. Floor plans from old community housing projects rested in a drawer. On the wall was a photograph of her mother standing on the porch of their first rented house in Aurora, smiling as if dignity could make any doorway beautiful. Soraya touched the frame and finally let one tear fall. Only one. Not because there were no more, but because tomorrow would need clear eyes. By sunrise, she had opened her laptop, renewed the business license she had let expire, and typed 3 words at the top of a blank page. Belmont Rooms. Initiative. She did not know yet how far it would go. She only knew she would build places where women were not hidden, renamed, or asked to enter through the side door. 1 year later, the name Soraya Belmont no longer moved through rooms as a whisper. It stood on grant applications, community planning boards, local news features, and the brass plaque outside a restored brick building on Welton Street, where sunlight poured through tall windows onto clean floors, soft chairs, and walls painted the color of morning. Belmont Room's initiative had begun with one woman at a kitchen table and a laptop opened before sunrise, but grief, when given purpose, could become architecture. Soraya started with 3 apartments above an old bakery in 5 Points, redesigning them for women rebuilding after divorce, financial loss, illness, or quiet years of being told they were too much trouble to protect. She chose warm lamps instead of harsh ceiling lights, strong locks, deep blue curtains, beds with real headboards, kitchen tables wide enough for children to do homework while their mothers filled out job applications. Every detail said the same thing without words. You are not temporary. By spring, a retired contractor named Willard Price donated weekend labor. By summer, a Denver church offered storage space for furniture. By fall, 2 city council members asked Soraya to speak about dignified housing at a public forum, and she stood behind a simple microphone in a copper dress, not hiding her hands when they trembled, not lowering her eyes when people looked at her with recognition. Some recognized her from the photograph outside Whitaker Horizon. Some recognized her from the gossip that followed. But by the time she finished speaking, they recognized her for something else. Not betrayal. Vision. The first major donation came from a woman in Boulder who wrote only one sentence on the check memo. For the rooms we had to build inside ourselves. Soraya framed a copy of that memo and hung it in the hallway. She never spoke publicly about Callum unless asked directly, and when she was, her answer remained calm. My past taught me what erasure feels like. My work teaches me what restoration can do. That sentence traveled farther than any scandal headline. Meanwhile, Whitaker Horizon changed in quieter, colder ways. The federal merger stalled under review. Donors stepped back from the campaign that had once displayed Callum and Marisol as a perfect public couple. Marisol resigned in October, calling it a personal transition, but everyone in Denver knew the language of polished exits. Callum appeared at fewer events. When he did appear, the cameras caught the hollowness around his eyes, the way his left hand sometimes reached toward his vest pocket where the repaired watch now stayed. He had retrieved it from the conference table after Soraya left, but it no longer comforted him. It kept time too honestly. On a snowy evening the following January, Soraya received an invitation to the Aspen Winter Philanthropy Ball. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and addressed to Ms. Soraya Belmont, founder and executive director, Belmont Rooms Initiative. She read it twice in the quiet of her office, where floor plans covered one table and donated quilts were stacked along the wall. Whitaker Horizon was listed as a principal sponsor. Callum's name appeared near the bottom, smaller than it once would have been. Hers appeared on the program as keynote speaker. For a long moment, Soraya stood still, hearing the old echo of marble floors, the receptionist's careful voice, the word staff entrance cutting through a public lobby. Then she looked around the room she had built, at the thank you cards pinned above her desk, at the photograph of the first woman who had moved into a Belmont apartment, holding her daughter beside a yellow front door, at the new life that had risen, not from revenge, but from refusal. She accepted the invitation that night, not to prove she had survived. Survival had already become too small a word for her. She accepted because some doors did not need to be avoided forever. Some doors needed to be entered again, under your own name, with the whole room learning how to say it correctly. The Aspen Winter Philanthropy Ball unfolded beneath chandeliers shaped like falling ice, inside a mountain lodge where every window framed snow-covered peaks, and every table glittered with crystal, silver, and quiet judgment. Soraya arrived without an entourage, wearing a copper satin gown that warmed her brown skin beneath the golden lights. Her hair swept softly away from her face, her only jewelry a pair of small amber earrings that had belonged to her mother. She did not look like a woman returning to a room that had once wounded her. She looked like a woman who had brought her own light with her. Conversations softened as she entered. Some people recognized her immediately. Others read her name on the program and straightened as if they had just realized the evening's most important guest was not the billionaire whose company sponsored the wine, but the woman whose work had given 47 families a safe place to begin again. Callum saw her from across the ballroom. He stood near the sponsor wall in a black tuxedo, thinner than before, his expression carefully composed until Soraya's name was announced. Then something in him went still. On the screen behind the stage, there was no staged couple, no borrowed wife, no manufactured family image. There was only Soraya Belmont, founder of Belmont Rooms Initiative, standing beside photographs of restored apartments, painted porches, children's desks, and women smiling in doorways they no longer feared losing. As she walked to the microphone, the applause began politely. Then it grew, not loud in a careless way, but deep, steady, earned. Soraya waited until the room settled. Her hands rested lightly on the podium. A home, she began, is not just walls and a roof. It is the first place a person learns whether they are safe enough to become themselves. The ballroom changed with that sentence. Forks stilled, shoulders lowered. Even the donors who had come prepared to be seen found themselves listening instead. Soraya spoke of women who had carried children, resumes, medical bills, and heartbreak into rooms that finally called them by their names. She spoke of design as dignity, of locks that worked, lamps that softened fear, tables large enough for second chances. She never mentioned Callum. She did not need to. Every word became its own. Quiet verdict. From the back of the ballroom, he watched the woman he had hidden become the center of a room he could no longer command. When Soraya finished, there was one breath of silence, clean and complete. Then the audience rose. Chair by chair, table by table, the room stood for her. Callum stood too, but he looked smaller than the applause around him. His hands came together slowly, and for the first time, he understood that regret was not the pain of losing someone. Regret was watching her become everything she was meant to be, and knowing your absence helped make her free. After the applause faded, Soraya stepped away from the stage into a quieter hallway lined with tall windows and pine garland. Beyond the glass, aspen snow fell over the dark mountains in slow silver sheets. She had just reached the balcony doors when Callum's voice followed her, lower than she remembered. Soraya. She stopped, not because he still had the power to stop her, but because she no longer feared hearing her name in his mouth. He stood a few feet away, one hand inside his tuxedo jacket, his face stripped of the confidence that had once filled entire rooms. Marisol is gone, he said. The campaign is over. The board knows everything. I should have stood beside you. I should have protected your name before I protected mine. Soraya listened without softening herself to make his regret easier to carry. Callum removed the old pocket watch from his jacket and placed it in her palm. It still works, he whispered. I kept it because I kept hoping time would give me one chance to become the man you believed I was. Soraya looked down at the watch. Its silver face gleamed beneath the hallway lights, hands moving steadily, faithfully, as if time had never been wounded at all. For a moment, she saw their old apartment, the paper cups of coffee, the man who had dreamed before power taught him performance. Then she closed the watch and returned it to him. Time can be repaired, Callum, she said gently. Trust cannot always be. His eyes filled, but she did not mistake his sorrow for a future. I forgive you, she continued, but forgiveness is not a doorway back into the house that erased me. Behind them, the ballroom lights glowed warmly. Ahead of her, the balcony opened to clean winter air. Soraya walked outside alone, copper gown brushing softly against the snow-dusted stone, her shoulders straight, her name fully her own. And as dawn began to pale behind the mountains, the woman once hidden at the entrance of another person's empire stepped into a world she had built herself. Some endings are quiet because the strongest choice has already been made. If you were standing in that snow with the person who erased you finally asking for another chance, would you return to what once felt like home, or would you keep walking toward the life you rebuilt with your own hands? Tell me honestly, where would your heart stop, and where would your dignity begin?